Hey friend! Welcome to the Branding with Jade podcast. I'm Jade, also known as the Aussie Adventuress, and I left the high-flying corporate world to chase my dreams and build an online business. Now, my biggest passion is teaching you how to get paid to be yourself doing what you love. If you want my secrets on all things personal branding, marketing, entrepreneurship, and making money doing what you love, then lovely, you are in the right place. Let's go. Hello and welcome to episode 21 of the Branding with Jade podcast. I'm so excited to be here as usual. Now, I do have a little confession to make. I actually recorded this episode on Sunday, but I haven't shared it yet because I wasn't happy with it. So I was happy with the content, but I didn't do my usual intro, and that's because I just got straight into it because I had written out my notes for it and I was just going off those, and I was kind of hungover when I was recording it, and so I didn't think to add anything extra in like I usually do. And I've been holding back from sharing the episode, and I realize now that that's why, because I didn't make it my own. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about some posts that I made on Instagram this week. Well, one in particular where I said that I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to create a lot of content before I go to the Philippines. So I leave for the Philippines this Sunday, and what I had wanted to do was batch record a few episodes so I could have them coming out as while I was away, because I'm not bringing my laptop with me. And I'm not planning to record any episodes while I'm away because we're going for a wedding and island tours and all of that kind of stuff. And the Philippines is the worst place for internet. I remember last time I was there, it was impossible to get on it. So knowing that, I decided it's no point bringing my laptop with me, and I really just want to enjoy this holiday. And so I was putting all this pressure on myself to batch create all this content. And usually I'm pretty good at, I'm good at batching Instagram content because I can write stuff all day, every day, and I can load up heaps of content. But what I do find is with the podcast, I like to be in the moment, and like even things like IGTV, I'll batch record and then it'll get to the day when I'm due to post, and I won't feel as aligned to the topic as I did at the time of recording. And so for me, even though I do understand the value in batching and how it can save time and all of that kind of stuff, I do feel for me that I like my content to be in the moment and authentic. And so it's trying to work out what works for you. And whilst I see the value in batching, and I'll probably do a podcast episode all about why batching is really good and all of that kind of stuff, I do also find that sometimes batching isn't the best strategy for me. And so I noticed that even with the episode that I recorded on Sunday, because I didn't do the in the moment intro, I didn't feel right. I like to have my story where I share a bit with you at the beginning, and they're the kind of podcast episodes that I enjoy. I like when the podcaster shares a little bit at the start and then they get into the episode. And so I thought, I can't really pre-predict how I'm going to be feeling when I'm in the Philippines, so I can't do those intros. And so that just stopped me from recording and batching anything. And so I just wanted to come in here and share that before I get into this week's episode, because I want you to know that I'm not going to be here for a couple of weeks. So if you're expecting episodes while I'm away, I wanted to give you a warning so you know that they won't be there. And yeah, I just wanted to share my pre-episode thoughts like I usually do. So that's just a little bit about how I was feeling, and I wanted to share that with you. And yes, now let's get into the episode, which is all about the do's and don'ts of using stock photos. So I think it's a really important topic to discuss because photos are such an important part of building a personal brand. And so I really just wanted to give you my thoughts on how to use stock photos the right way. So let's get into the episode. So, we all know that good photos are a really big part of establishing a powerful personal brand, and pretty much every social media platform these days are visual. And even on platforms that aren't primarily about the visuals, it's still important to have some photos to really bring your stories and writing or presentations or whatever to life. So, for instance, I actually created a graphic on Instagram last week about all the places that you should be sharing your stories. And guess what? All those places are also places you should be using images to accompany the stories, because that's what would really bring a story to life. So we're talking things like your website, social media, ebooks, webinars, email marketing, sales pages. Pretty much everywhere that you present yourself online, you really need to have visuals to accompany that. Even things like podcast episodes, you can have different banners for each episode. You can use graphics that you share on your social media to promote the episodes. There's so many things that you do, and everything requires a visual component. So images are really important, and that's what really brings something to life. So think about it. If you were to go to a website and there weren't any photos, or if you were looking at a sales page or someone's social media and there's no photos, you wouldn't be very excited, right? So we know photos are super important, but this can pose a dilemma sometimes if you're not using the right kind of photos. And especially in 2020, the competition is fierce. There's so many people out there with similar businesses, and it's really not enough to just be using any old photos. You need to really put thought into the kinds of images you're using, and you shouldn't just be posting for the sake of it. You should be thinking about the purpose of your post, what story you're trying to tell, and what images are really going to convey that message. So your photos need to tell the right story. They need to give the right impression. And above all, they need to be totally aligned to your brand. And I do get it. It can be tough to take your own photos all the time. Maybe you don't have the right lighting, you don't have the greatest equipment, which, by the way, you don't always need fancy equipment. Whenever I take my photos, I just use my iPhone. I have got the latest one. I always try to keep my phone up to date because I know that way I've got good camera quality. But I do have professional cameras, and I tend not to use them because most of my photos are taken in the moment and then I use them later on, but I don't carry my camera around with me everywhere. So you don't necessarily need fancy equipment, but sometimes you might want that crisper, clearer image that a professional equipment can get. And so sometimes you might not be able to capture what you want, or you don't have the right setup, or you just might not feel skilled enough to take great images. But you still know the importance, and you still want to have images that really give a great representation of your brand and your story. And you could hire a professional photographer to help. Sometimes you don't always need to have a photographer just take photos of you. You can tell them you want a mix of images of yourself as well as flat lays and detail shots, which are images of props that tell a good story about your brand and business. And that can work really well to have that kind of stuff in your arsenal. But if that's not in your budget just yet, then that's where stock images can be a really good alternative. But this is the whole point of this episode today, is I see a lot of people making a lot of mistakes with stock images. And so some people go really wrong. And this is why I want to talk to you about the do's and don'ts of using stock images. So this probably won't be a very long episode, but I do feel like it's an important topic to cover, because photos are such a big part of building a personal brand, and the photos you use can really make or break your brand if they're not being used correctly, and if there's no thought going into them, and if you're doing things that don't align, then you can damage your brand reputation. So this is a really important topic to cover, and so I do think it's necessary to talk about it. So yes, what I'm about to talk about are actual mistakes that I do see people making all the time. So I want to help you avoid making those mistakes. So, and I'm going to do like don't do. So it's not going to be all don'ts. There's going to be a mix of things you don't do and a mix of things you do. So let's get into it. So number one, the biggest mistake I see people making, it's such a bad thing to do. Don't use photos you don't have the right to use. So this screams unprofessionalism, and it's just not good for your brand because it just shows that you're not putting the time and effort to actually take images or get the right images that represent your brand. So the worst thing is when people either just download an image straight from Google or they screenshot it and then it's actually got the watermark still on it. So I'm sure you've probably seen that sometimes where you've seen someone share an image and it's got words written across it. So like sometimes like Shutterstock or Deposit Photos or wherever it is they've got it from, it actually says that word across it. And it's got like crosses and pixels and all that stuff. So it's not a clear, crisp photo, and you can tell that it's not their photo. So they've literally just taken a screenshot, downloaded an image that they have no rights to use, and so it's covered in watermarks, and that just does not look good for your brand. So what you would need to do is you'd need to purchase it from that site so you actually have the right to use it. So this is so important, and it's such a basic principle of using stock photos. If you're using ones that have watermarks across them, not only does this do absolutely nothing for your brand, but it could get you into trouble because you're using something you don't have the right to use. And another thing you want to be careful about is copying photos from someone else's social media. So say, for instance, someone came to my Instagram account and they liked one of my photos on there, one of my flat lays or something, and they just took a screenshot of it and then shared it to their own account. That's actually illegal because a lot of the photos I use are either my own photos or they're photos that I've paid a photographer to take of my own things. So a lot of the photos are of my own journals, my own books, my accessories, my jewelry, all of that kind of stuff. So they're specifically taken for me and I bought the rights to use them. So I don't want other people using them because then that takes it away from my brand because it's my image. Or I've purchased stock photos from sites where I've got subscriptions to, and so I have the right to use them, but that doesn't mean that you have the right to come and use it from my account because you haven't paid a subscription to them. So that's the terms in the license is I can use it, but somebody else can't come along and use it unless they also buy it from that site. So you really need to be careful about it. And if you are going to borrow photos from people on social media, you really need to ask permission and make sure that it's acceptable for you to use it because you could get into a lot of trouble for that. So even if you're tagging them, you need to be careful about that. So you don't want to get into hot water over photos. So make sure that the photos you're using are expressly allowed to be used by you. Now, number two, if you are going to use stock images, make sure you do have the right to do so. So like I was just saying, and if you do purchase them, make sure you read the specific agreement of the stock site you've purchased from, because some sites will allow you to use their photos for different purposes, and it's important to know where you stand. For instance, most stock sites will allow you to use the photos for your personal use, which means you can use it in your social media, you can use it in your marketing collateral, but you can't then go on to create products that you sell to other people using their photos. So say you wanted to create some templates in Canva, you couldn't put somebody else's photos in there that you've purchased because then you're selling a product and then other people could get access to the photos that they don't have the right to use. So you need to really be clear on what the license says and make sure that you're using the photos in the right way. So it's really important to know where you stand, and it's really important to read those agreements because every stock site is different. Now, Number 3, don't use photos of other people to tell your story. So, for example, like if you're telling a story on Instagram, or if you've got a sales page and you're using photos of other people where it's like they're looking like strong, or like they've quit their job and they're cheering or things like that, not only do they look overposed and really inauthentic and fake and all of that kind of stuff, it's so obvious that it's a stock photo, but also it doesn't really do justice to your story because you're not in the picture. If you're telling a story, if you're trying to get someone to form a connection with you, then you really want to use pictures of you. So if you really do want to use other people, I'd use photos where they're not really the most biggest thing in the photo, where maybe they're not looking at the camera or they're blurred out a bit or things like that. But still, wherever you can, use yourself in the photos. Don't always use other people. Like, I just don't think that works very well. So using other people for like blog posts and things where you're explaining things might be all right, but in social media, in your sales pages, in your webinar presentations, use photos of yourself or your clients and things like that you've got permission to use. It's just no way around this. If you're building a personal brand, you need to be having photos of yourself. And if you are going to use photos of other people, I would, like I said, recommend using ones where you can't really see their face or the focus isn't on them. But still, my recommendation when it's accompanying a story about you or a post that's quite personal, you want the photos to be of yourself, as that's going to be so much more impactful. Number 4, do use flat lays, office settings, and all of that kind of stuff that represents your brand. A great place to use all of these types of images is things like your blog post cover images, banners for courses, the sales pages, social media. Like, you can mix the flat lays in amongst your posts. You can use it on graphics where, like I do with my podcast images, I've got the overlay with a stock photo behind it quite often. So that kind of thing, that's when stock photos are really good to use for marketing collateral and graphics and all of that kind of stuff. But to just use it as to replace photos of yourself, I wouldn't do that. Now, don't just use stock photos. So stock photos are a great way to enhance your brand and tell a story where necessary, but you shouldn't just use stock photos. If somebody comes across your social media and it's just chock full of everybody else's photos and nothing that's personal to you, no photos of you, no photos of your own stuff, it's not really gonna do anything for your brand because none of it is personal. So the hero of your content should still always be your own content, and then stock photos can be used when your images don't quite work. So sometimes I want to do a post about a specific thing and I don't really have the props for it. I don't really have the right photo, the right setting, and that's when I will go and look for a stock photo. Like the one when I spoke about color psychology the other week, I went and found a photo of a color wheel that was a stock photo. But most of the time I would use my own images, and then I use stock photos for things like that where it's graphics and to fill up my feed every now and then you'll see a stock photo in there. But you really want to be choosy with the stock photos you're using to make sure that it fits with your brand. Number 6, do edit photos to make them your own. So when you're getting stock photos, you are allowed to use them in the way that you want to use them. So if you want to use them in graphics, if you want to put overlays of them, if you want to add stuff into them, like a lot of stock photos are made for you to be able to use them as mock-ups. So if you had like an ebook cover and you wanted to put that in the setting, or you had a course and you want to put it in the laptop screen, that's what stock photos are really good for. So you can edit the images and really set the scene around your product rather than just having a boring picture of an ebook cover. you've put the ebook cover in a setting that looks really good and looks really inviting. So that is the great thing about stock photos. You can use them to set a scene. You can add text and turn it into a nice quote image. So that's what works really well when you make the stock image your own. So a lot of the times you'll see that I do, like with my podcast graphics, when you look at them, it's got the stock image at the back, and then it's got the overlay, and then it's got the writing over the top. So the stock image isn't the hero, it's just the background, which is nice to have the imagery there, but it's not specifically about that. It's about everything else that I've made my own. Number 7, don't keep using the same free stock photos that everyone is using. This is something I see so many people doing, and like you'll go on Instagram or you'll go on websites and you'll literally just see the same photos being regurgitated over and over and over, and that really does nothing for your brand. So it really does pay to be picky. It pays to do a little extra research to find the photos that are actually right for your brand and your message, have the right kind of color palettes, have the right kind of feel, the right kind of props that suit your brand. There's no point using props that you have no emotional or personal connection to, because it's not going to really send a message. So when you start to see the same photos popping up on site after site, it gets old very quickly, and it really doesn't do anything to enhance your brand. So you don't want to be a brand that's just the same as everyone else. You want to choose your stock photos wisely, and you really want to think of it as an investment into your brand. So free is not always the best way to go with stock photos. If you are going to use free, then I've added some links to my favorite free stock photo sites in the show notes. However, what I found when I used to use their photos is I ended up seeing other people with the same ones, and I really didn't like that, which is why I did end up subscribing to a premium stock photo service that was totally aligned with my brand. And that brings me to my final point, which is one of my biggest do's. And if you're going to use stock photos, then I highly recommend making this investment. It's one of the best things you can do. Subscribe to a site that is well aligned to your brand. So there are so many different photo subscription sites out there now because it's such a big thing. So you are bound to find one that suits your brand and budget. And I've been part of a few different ones now, but my all-time favorite one is called Haute Stock. They have 2 types of subscriptions, a quarterly one or an annual model. And when you sign up, you get access to their entire library, which currently has over 4,000 images. Plus, they upload new ones each week. They always align their themes to the season, various holidays that are coming up, and things like that. And they work with different color schemes and different themes to cater to all types of brands. So they've got like your health and wellness stuff. They've got the girl boss stuff. They've got indoor stuff, outdoor stuff. And a lot of it is catered to female entrepreneurship, but they've got all other types of themes as well. So there's really something for everyone in there. And I love it. I highly recommend checking them out. So I've shared a link to their site in the show notes as well. And that's basically it. My top do's and don'ts to using stock photos. I do think there is a really good place for stock photos in your branding and in your marketing and in your visual content, but I do think it's not just a matter of going to one of the free sites and picking the first photo you see. Really think about the purpose of the photo, what it represents, what it means, what the story is you're trying to tell, and make sure the photos you're using actually have a purpose and actually fit with your brand, and you're not just using them for the sake of having a photo to post. And there you have it, the do's and don'ts of using stock photos to enhance your personal brand online. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you got a lot of value out of this episode, and please remember that there won't be any episodes for a couple of weeks because I'm off to sun myself and relax in the Philippines. Can you believe this is the first time in 2 years that I'm not bringing my laptop with me? everywhere else that I've traveled to over the last few years has been for marketing events or business events or just for content creation and like blogging and that kind of stuff. And so even though I've been on holidays, I've always had my laptop with me. And it's just a really weird feeling to know that I'm going away and I'm not bringing it with me. I'm still obviously going to be online on Instagram and stuff whenever I can get access to internet, because I love being on there. I love showing up on stories and sharing what goes on, and especially when I'm traveling, I love sharing my travels because it's one of my favorite things to do. So you'll still hear from me over there, but yeah, I will not be on my website or blog or emails or podcast. It's pretty crazy stuff, and I'm so excited. So I really hope you all have an awesome few weeks while I'm not here to fill your ears with my voice. You can go back and listen to other episodes. And yes, I will be here ready to provide more awesome content for you when I get back. I can't wait. And I will see you or speak to you all soon. Bye for now. And by the way, this episode is brought to you by Haute Stock. So this is my go-to stock photography site because their photos are by far the best I've seen. And when I use them, they often get mistaken for my own photos because they are so on brand. And they have such a huge selection of palettes and styles to suit every type of brand out there. They upload new image bundles every week. Plus, they also have a great selection of quotes and graphics. And right now, it's actually their 5th birthday, and to celebrate, they are giving out the biggest bundle of all with loads of editable Canva templates on top of access to their entire stock image library. So if you wanted to try that out for yourself, you can check it out at jadescarfone.com/haute. They also have a deal at the moment where you can get 21 free images to test it out and see if the images styles are right for your brand. So go to jadescarfone.com/haute. It's linked in the show notes, and I promise if you're a female entrepreneur, you won't be disappointed. They have the best photos and it is totally worth it. So go check them out. Thank you for listening. I really hope you find a way to use stock photos in your branding, and I hope you got a lot of good tips out of this episode. So thank you, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.